Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll have an inside energy story from Amy Sisk. But first, joining me now is the board chair for the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library Foundation, Dr. Bruce Pitts. Dr. Pitts, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
As we get started, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background, where you're originally from.
I'm originally from Rhode Island and came out to North Dakota with the U.S. Public Health Service. I'm a physician. Loved it here, stayed, practiced medicine in Fargo for over 30 years, and now I'm doing this.
And when you say doing this, well, how did you get involved?
It was through my relationship with Clay Jenkinson, who is the humanities scholar at the Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University, and through the president of Dickinson State at that time, D.C. Costin, who I knew both of them well. They asked me if I would be interested in being involved in this. I said yes. They didn't say anything about chairing the board, but that happened eventually as well.
Well, okay, so we're talking about a presidential library.
That's right.
Being built in North Dakota. What was the genesis of the project?
That's an interesting story. About 12 or 13 years ago, Dickinson State began a project to digitize all of the papers of Theodore Roosevelt. His papers are spread all over the planet. Many of them are at Harvard, Library of Congress. There's no one place scholars can go to grab anything. And under the direction of Clay Jenkinson and Sharon Kilzer, the TR Center has now made enormous progress in digitizing and cataloging those papers. They've done about 40,000 of them so far. They have more to go. And scholars around the world now look upon this TR Center's website as the place to secure many of the documents, images, cartoons, audio, video of Theodore Roosevelt that they need for their research. In 2013, the North Dakota legislature, in an effort to build upon the success of the TR Center, passed legislation to provide seed funding for a presidential library for Theodore Roosevelt in North Dakota, building upon the success at the TR Center.
Well, and you say that, what kind of partnerships do you have? Because this is a little different, the way I understand it, and you may tell me different. Presidential libraries a lot of times are now funded through other sources, and this one was predated that funding.
That's right. The funding for presidential libraries began in 1939 with legislation that declared the presidential papers were part of the public record and belonged to the public. And the first presidential library was Herbert Hoover, then Franklin Roosevelt. All the presidents preceding that, presidential papers were thought to be their personal papers, and they disposed with them at however they saw fit. And so doing a president pre-NARA, it's called the National Archives and Records Administration, pre-NARA legislation, there are presidential libraries. There's one for Abraham Lincoln. We have Monticello for Jefferson and Mount Vernon for Washington. But they're all not-for-profit, foundation-based, and not funded by the U.S. government. And ours as well will be not-for-profit, independent 501c3 corporation.
Okay. Well, I understand ground's been broken out at the Dickinson Rodeo Grounds?
That's right. We have 27 acres in Dickinson, which is a fabulous site. And we have cleared the land. And on the weekend of October 8th, we began construction of a replica of the Elkhorn Cabin. It was a festival where we began to debark and adze the cottonwood trees that will be used in that precise replication of the Elkhorn Cabin.
Well, now, you talk about the Elkhorn Cabin, you've started construction. You know, what will that mean? What is it?
Well,
what will that be?
The Elkhorn, you know, Roosevelt had two ranches in North Dakota. The Elkhorn was about 25 miles north of Medora. The site is there. It's part of the national park. It's a spiritual place. The cabin is gone. There has been talk in the past about reconstructing the cabin there. It's very hard to get to. We don't know how many people would actually go, and the park, I think in its wisdom, decided to keep it a more of a sanctuary for Roosevelt and not to recreate the cabin. There never has been a life-size replica of the cabin built. So we're going to do that as part of the Presidential Library campus. so that people can get a firsthand feel for how he lived when he was at the Elkhorn.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, I think you may have just told me a little bit, but why was Dickinson then chosen as the site?
That's, well, for several reasons. Number one, it's in TR country. It's only a half hour from the TR National Park. And the TR National Park is our neighbor and friend in this. And they have been incredibly supportive of our efforts. It's very close to Medora. Dickinson, for several reasons. Number one, it's Dickinson State University that did the groundbreaking work with digitizing Roosevelt's papers. When in 2013 the legislature granted $12 million to this project, they did so on the condition that $3 million in non-state money be provided to match the 12. The city of Dickinson provided that $3 million, which was very generous. Dickinson, this is a year-round facility. There are going to be obviously tourism mostly in the warm months, but throughout the year there'll be seminars, scholars, and it needs to be in a place that has the infrastructure for year-round activities. And Dickinson is the obvious place in TR country to do that.
Okay. Well, with that said, you've thrown out some numbers here. So what is the estimated total project cost, and where do you hope that money's coming from?
Right now, I don't work with hope, by the way. We are determined and organized. The entire project will cost about $100 million as we currently see it. $60 million of that will go to construction, landscaping, and exhibits, $40 million to an endowment to ensure that there is ongoing funding for the Theodore Roosevelt Center and for the Presidential Library over time.
Okay. So again, with a $100 million project then, you said you don't go on hope. So what are the plans? I mean, is it just a capital campaign? What are you going to be doing?
Yes, we'll be doing, you know, the city and state have been very generous, and we don't know if there will be further funding from the state going forward. Obviously, we would relish that, but we don't take that for granted. We are going to be initiating a capital campaign this spring, which will be a national campaign. We're in the process now of selecting the fundraising firm that will help us do that. We've been told by our consultants that we're shooting too low, that we're dealing with Roosevelt, not Miller J. Fillmore, and that there is passion for him from any number of quarters, and that there is particular interest in preserving and perpetuating this digitization project. This will be the first presidential library of its type. So, but we recognize that we don't want to get overly ambitious, so we're going to start with a $85 million campaign and see where that takes us.
Well, with that said, and are you concerned about the cost considering North Dakota's current budget?
Well, again, we're not going to be, aside from the $12 million already allocated by the state, we're not counting on anything else.
Okay.
We'd love it.
Right.
And certainly not for ongoing operation costs once it's built. Between ticket sales, other sales, grants, events, and the endowment, we have developed a financial plan that will ensure that this is economically self-sustaining over time.
Okay. Again, not going on hope. When is the facility, when do you plan for it to be completed?
Well, right now, our Gantt charts have it being completed in 2019,
Really? Okay.
which is very ambitious. That's the centennial of Roosevelt's death. And so we would like to open it in 2019. That may be ambitious because everything would have to line up perfectly for that to happen, and in projects such as this, they rarely do. But that currently is our plan.
Yeah, you mentioned library first of its kind, maybe, or something. So, what will people see when they go to this library?
Well, first of all, they will see a building and grounds that, regardless of how you feel about TR, are worth visiting. They will be beautiful and worth seeing. It will be well integrated into the community of Dickinson, so that the people of Dickinson feel welcome there and find it useful for them as well. The experience of, one of the things that intrigues many of the people involved with the project is how do you take a digital library that you can fit in a suitcase and connect it to a visitor experience? And so we will have very advanced virtual reality and holographic experiences for people to augment the museum part of this, which will include objects of relevance to Roosevelt. So, for example, the story I love. We asked a young woman named Robin McQuinn to please go out and find one of the steam shovels actually used to dig the Panama Canal. She found one. And that is going to, and we're in the process of negotiating having that contributed to the library. That will be in the library. This is a 70-ton Bucyrus steam shovel. When you look at it, it's huge. There are photographs of Roosevelt in the white suit and Panama hat sitting in it. When you look at that steam shovel with pictures taken from above the Panama Canal, it looks tiny. So we'll have this monstrous machine, but with computerized graphics, give people a sense for how tiny it was within the scope of the whole project. So they're just opportunities for creating experiences to give people a sense of scope and scale as well as history.
Great. What about the process of procuring items? You mentioned that one. What's that like?
Well, we actually haven't gone out to intentionally find any. People are coming to us. A lot of TR memorabilia are held in private collections. And just last weekend, I had 2 people contact me about what they might want to do with their private collections of campaign buttons and things such as that. We've been contacted by a group that is excavating one of the boats that TR used to float the River of Doubt in Brazil, and are wanting to see if we might be interested in procuring that. So they come to us, and there are things we obviously know about that we'd love to get our hands on, but apparently that's not going to be much of a problem.
Well, good. Are you working with the ancestors of Theodore Roosevelt at all?
Yes, a number of our board members and members of our staff have good relationships with members of the Roosevelt family and with the Theodore Roosevelt Association in New York. Most of us are members of that group. We haven't formalized those relationships yet. We wanted to have the plans more fully developed before we approach them for formal relationships, but we've had numerous friendly relationships with them, and they know about the project, are interested in it, and several of them have been out to get some acquaintance with it.
Well, that's great. Good to hear that. So will this have a feel, you think, of a traditional presidential library, or will it be more of a combination of his presidency and non-presidency?
What's fascinating about Roosevelt is that if he were never president, he would still have had a thrilling life. And there are just too many stories to tell. And we will deal very heavily with his life outside of the presidency, before and after, as well as his life inside the presidency, because there's just so much there. There's so much to his personal story that people may know or may not know that says so much about who he was as a human being, and we intend to delve into that quite deeply.
Well, and there is the comment that he made about had he not spent time in North Dakota,
yeah,
he would have never been president.
That's right. You know, he came here in 1883 to shoot a buffalo. Within 10 days, he'd bought a ranch. Went back home for the winter of '83-'84, and Valentine's Day of '84, his wife and mother died on the same day. He came back here in '84, grief-stricken, bought another ranch because the Maltese Cross just had too many people around it. He wanted something more remote, so he built the Elkhorn, and dealt with his sorrow and set up for several years of adventure in the Dakotas, which he says it was here that the romance of my life began. Mm-hmm. So it had an enormous impact on him in many perspectives, and we will certainly deal with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've talked about the building some. Architecturally, from what I've talked about and heard about, this will be something different and a marvel, and it will really fit for North Dakota.
It will fit for North Dakota. We had an architectural competition, and the specifications that we laid out was that we wanted people to enter this 28-acre site, and with the landscaping and the architecture and just the feel of the place, the sights and sounds and smells, that they would get a hint of what Roosevelt experienced when he was here, even though we're in the middle of a town. And a local architectural firm won that competition, JLG, by creating a very serene site with cottonwoods and a replication of the Little Missouri River, the Elkhorn Ranch, And even though it would be pretty hokey to sort of build artificial buttes in the middle of Dickinson, the building itself evoked the sense of the Badlands. And it was just beautifully done with the angles and the colored striations. And they nailed what we had asked for. We don't know if that's going to be the final design, but many of us have fallen in love with it.
Yeah, you know, how many people or volunteers are involved with this project? Seems like a huge project.
It is a huge project, and so far it has been predominantly volunteers, with very few exceptions. Over the past few months, we have just begun paying people for what they're doing and bringing people on board, either part or full time, to execute this work. There are several hundred currently involved in this. We were on the weekend of the TR Symposium at the end of September in Dickinson. We brought the attendees there and the scholars who presented there out to look at the logs and tell them what was going to happen on the site. And they began ripping bark off the cottonwood logs and taking it as souvenirs. So, during the Elkhorn Festival, we had a lot of volunteers there demonstrating how they're going to do the work of preparing these logs for construction. So between people helping to secure funds, between the board members, between people who are just stepping up and volunteering to help us build, volunteering to give us relics of Roosevelt or from his time, it's an enormous group.
So why do you think, you've talked about it a little bit, why do you think there is such a fascination for Theodore Roosevelt still continues today?
He was such a complicated man, and when I think about the experience that I want people to have at the Presidential Library, is to illuminate a man in his time who presents some of the questions that we deal with in ours. It's very easy to look back and judge through our current value set what he might have done and look upon it negatively. Well, it causes, 100 years from now, what are people going to look at us and say, boy, they really didn't do that very well, or they really were not thinking properly or feeling properly about things. So he just presents so many opportunities for it. He was a conservationist, he was a naturalist, he was a Navy historian, he was a president. He just touched so many aspects of American life that he connects with people in a variety of ways.
You know, again,
and he was such a character.
Well, he was a character, and you're right. Bigger than life, larger than life sometimes. Yeah. But if you had to predict, will you stay on timeline, or do you anticipate that it might take a little longer?
We're going to stay on timeline, and I anticipate it'll take longer.
Good luck to you. And what will it mean for the state of North Dakota to have this?
Well, if you think about the fact that people currently come to Medora and the National Park, about 700,000 people came to the National Park this summer. And people typically come, many of them don't know that Medora is more than a gas station, and some of the people who come to Medora don't know the National Park is there. So if you think about getting the whole act together around Western North Dakota, TR, and what we have to offer from a historical and a landscaping perspective, it's going to bring a lot more people. Plus, it's going to bring a lot of scholars, a lot of activity that's very prestigious. And it's going to have an architectural presence that will be international in its appeal.
Well, Dr. Pitts, we're out of time. People want more information. Where can they go?
They can go to the TR Library, trpresidentiallibrary.org.
All right. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure being here.
Stay tuned for more. Energy has not been a top talking point for the presidential candidates this year, but this election could have implications on the ground for energy-producing states. Inside Energy's Amy Sisk looks at what's at stake in North Dakota.
At the second presidential debate this fall, audience member Ken Bone asked the question on every energy state's mind.
What steps will your energy policy take to meet our energy needs, while at the same time remaining environmentally friendly?
And candidates Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton could not be more different when it comes to energy policy. One wants to get government out of the industry.
Any regulation that's outdated, unnecessary, bad for workers, or contrary to the national interest will be scrapped and scrapped completely.
And the other wants to regulate fossil fuels while bolstering renewables.
And we're going to combat climate change with more clean, renewable energy jobs.
Either candidate's energy platform could have real impact on the ground in states like North Dakota, where coal, oil, and gas are kings.
We have 3 seams of coal here, and the first seam of coal is actually pretty much on the level that we're at. We mine about 4.5 million tons a year.
The lignite from this mine feeds the nearby power plant. Coal-burning plants like this one generate 75% of North Dakota's electricity. But one of the most pressing energy issues on the next president's plate could change that. The Clean Power Plan aims to reduce harmful greenhouse gases. It would force North Dakota to cut its carbon emissions 45% by 2030.
Lignite coal is very brittle.
Jason Borer is president of the Lignite Energy Council. He says the Clean Power Plan could cripple North Dakota's coal industry.
The hardest regulation right now for us to meet is the carbon dioxide reduction requirement of the Clean Power Plan. And as a consequence, really the only viable way to reduce carbon dioxide from a coal plant is just to shut it down. And those mines don't have any other customers. So the job loss is really compounded in North Dakota when a power plant shuts down.
North Dakota is one of 24 states that have sued the federal government over the Clean Power Plan. That lawsuit will likely reach the Supreme Court. Congressman Kevin Cramer says the outcome may come down to the next president's pick to fill the vacancy on the bench.
Supreme Court is critical to whether the Clean Power Plan is allowed to go through or not.
North Dakota's oil fields also have much at stake if the Clean Power Plan is implemented. The state is trying to reduce the massive amount of natural gas that is wasted when oil is drilled. Mineral Resources Director Lynn Helms says more pipelines and gas processing facilities are needed to reduce that flaring. And all those require power.
Our concern is that the idling of those coal-fired power plants will make it literally impossible to provide the electric power that's needed for the new gas processing and gathering systems in western North Dakota.
But there's also a possible upside. If the Clean Power Plan is implemented, it would increase demand for natural gas from the Bakken.
The retirement of coal-fired power would be a benefit to natural gas prices and natural gas production and consumption in the state.
The oil industry, however, is looking at the next president to change more than the Clean Power Plan. With crude prices low, companies have cut way back on drilling wells.
This is the heart of the Williston Basin.
Some in the industry, like Ron Ness, hope that Trump could help get business booming again by removing Obama administration regulations targeting fracking and emissions.
On the Trump side, I think you hope for smarter regulations, better business-friendly regulations that understand you got to move forward with your business.
But Don Morrison at the Dakota Resource Council says a Clinton presidency would better address the impacts of oil development on North Dakotans.
Under a Clinton presidency, oil and gas is going to do just fine. They have in the past, and they will in the future. We'd hope for a much more balanced approach that the needs and concerns and the livelihoods of people who live near fossil fuel extraction are considered a whole lot more than they have been in the last 10 years.
But oil, gas, and coal aren't the only energy sources at stake in this election. Wind has boomed in North Dakota over the past decade. It now makes up 18% of the state's electricity mix. The outcome of this presidential election could further push fossil fuel states like this one toward renewables. Clinton has already proposed investing more in renewable energy. Morrison says that could help with the state's energy independence.
Wind and solar could be really beneficial for people who live in rural areas, and they could have their own sources of energy.
Under Trump, existing subsidies for renewables would likely go away. Cramer has been advising Trump on energy. He says those incentives would be replaced by a tax code that rewards energy made in the United States, whether that's wind turbines manufactured here or coal burned at the country's power plants.
It's not about picking the winners and losers. It's about setting the table so that all American energy can be successful, if it should be successful, and letting the markets determine that.
But government is always picking winners and losers. The fossil fuel industry has enjoyed its own subsidies for decades. That's why the stakes in this election couldn't be higher for the energy industry and for the states that depend on it. For Inside Energy, I'm Amy Sisk.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Inside Energy is a project of Prairie Public in cooperation with public broadcasters in Colorado and Wyoming, funded in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. See more at insideenergy.org. And by the members of Prairie Public.